Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Mike Sham. Welcome to our breakfast. We just want to play something for you.
Oh my gosh. Honey, look what's happening here. Lord, come on! Ish, I'm still screaming.
No, you know what they did? They disturbed them. This ones, they can kill you. This ones, they will kill you. I don't know, there's cops, these ones. You see? Is this one going to raise up now?
He's fainted. Dude, get up. Oh my word.
Look at the beers in the back, in the car. They destroyed the car now.
We live in a country where the governing party don't need to trouble themselves with the rules of our society. Our elected officials don't have the same worries that we have. They don't have to worry about having their lives disrupted by rolling blackouts which are caused by their corruption, because we buy them generators that get magically refueled whenever they run a bit low. We live in a country where half of the citizens are unemployed, a country that has no economic growth and cannot have economic growth because we have no electricity with which to grow. All of this while our president announces proudly that more than 20 million people survive of a grant of 350 rand per month. We live in a country where our government has turned away cheap, high-speed internet connectivity that would go a long way towards solving our education crisis and modernizing South Africa, because the provider couldn't comply with BEE regulations, couldn't give shares to some of their comrades who add no value to the company when they've got those shares. We live in a world-class African city being run by its fourth mayor this year alone. This is a mayor who ran a Ponzi scheme, selling fake funeral schemes. Can't even be trusted by his coalition partners to do a media interview, not even with the SABC. We live in a city which homeless people direct traffic, while our metro police eat streetwise too at an arbitrary roadblock. I suppose it's their turn to eat. We live in a country where the Minister of Health is involved in the theft of money that was set aside to deal with the implication of a global pandemic. We even have a government that managed to bring cholera back from the 19th century. While all of this is happening, we see coalitions of our opposition parties collapse. While those opposition party leaders bicker about committee positions and perceived slights. As weary taxpayers, we have to live with the outcome of this petty behavior by petty men who believe that they are less petty than the rulers of the ruling party. It's hard not to agree with R.W. Johnson when he says that we can't have a successful country or an ANC government. It's one or the other. South Africans are tired of being resilient. So, welcome to our breakfast. I'm sure I've cheered you up a lot. But I am very excited to hear from our opposition politicians and what they have in store for us. This event was organized before the announcement that there's going to be a convention, a long-waited-for national convention that will take place next month, in which our opposition parties will hammer out a coalition agreement. and all South Africans will have a better idea of how opposition party coalition politics could work. I would love to say that this is great news, but I keep on thinking, what took you so long? We've got a great lineup this morning. We do have a few changes. It will happen with this kind of event. Sadly, the leader of the IFP, Mr. Valankosini of Tlabisa, can't be with us today. He is abroad and couldn't get back in time. DA leader John Steenhuisen also had a couple of things to attend to, so he can't be here. He has sent Dr. Leon Schrieber to represent the DA in his place. But we did manage to convince Charles Celliers from the Patriotic Alliance to join us, and we're very excited to hear from him, especially to see where the PA stands, considering they are currently in coalition with the ANC. The 2024 general election will be the most important election in the history of South Africa. It will also signal the end of majority party rule in South Africa for another generation. If coalitions don't work, neither will South Africa. Our morning is going to be broken into two sessions. First one, where we're going to hear from our political leaders, opposition leaders, who are going to come and tell us how they view things and their attitude towards the coalition. We'll then have breakfast, and then afterwards I've got Davi Rutt and Sandile Swana very, very excited to put a few questions, as am I, to our political leaders. We've got a few people that have joined us as well, eminent people. Mayor of the City of Tshwane, Celliers Brink, welcome. From the Eastern Cape all the way, Athol Trollop, good to have you guys here. And most importantly, thank you to everybody that has come here this morning. You will notice a couple of things. For starters, there has been a definite lack of interest from the big corporates. Big companies, listed companies, usually for events like this take many tables. They've taken none. There's one or two people from big companies, but generally the big companies, the same ones that are sitting around the table with the ANC to try and fix up the country before the election next year, they're not taking tables at events like this. And it just tells you where South Africa sits at the moment. But, before we get too depressed, let's hear from some of our prominent leaders. Let's hear what they have in mind, how we can turn this around, how we can save South Africa while there is still something left to save. And I believe there is something left to save. I firmly believe that there's a lot that is left to fight for. I don't think that this is a failed state. I think parts of it aren't working. But I think I speak for all South Africans when I say we are tired of being resilient. I now take that resilience tag as an insult, not as a compliment, as a South African. Right? There's no reason why we should be helping out a government that won't do its job. And that goes from at local level, provincial, as well as national level. So it's time to get serious, and let's look forward to the future. There is a coalition brewing, and we do know that there's been a lot spoken about it, but let's hear from the people who are best placed to tell us whether this thing is going to work or not. So we're going to kick off with, I believe the status is an observer at the coalition talks rather than an active participant. He was formerly leader of the opposition in the country, and we all remember Musi Maimane really well, making wonderfully eloquent speeches facing down Jacob Zuma. He then left and has started his own party, Build One South Africa. So without any further ado, let's welcome on stage Mr. Musi Maimane.
Sanbonani Dumelang, goeiemorgen, good morning. It's okay. I know Joburg is cold, so it's important that you greet back so I know you are still alive. I miss this great city. It's an amazing place. And yet, when you look around, you get the contrast in Joburg. You get the beautiful people, beautiful roads. And then you see the potential of Joburg in terms of what it could be. And then you weep when you see, I guess, the potholes and you see the pain of what the city is going through. Thank you, Mike, for allowing me the great privilege to be here this morning. I think, fellow South Africans, we find ourselves at a very historic moment. And I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to make a few remarks about the state indeed of our nation. I think it's important to remind ourselves that South Africa is in the SADC region, we are the most recently democratized, which means the practice of democracy and the practice of coalitions is something that we're going to have to get used to and have to catch up quicker. You contrast us to a nation like Zimbabwe. They've had democracy since 1980. So in some ways, when you look at our neighboring countries, Botswana, etc., we still have a while to catch up, but a while we cannot afford. It is common cause, and I think Mike puts it out well. Next year will be coalition governments. The question on the table is, what will those look like? And I can discuss many things tonight, or maybe this morning, about what our challenges are. We all know we face a deepening level of youth unemployment that would collapse any government. 2 out of 3 young people are without the prospect of finding work. We face a health crisis. We face a safety crisis in that 70 of our fellow countrymen are murdered every single day, which is worse than what is going on in Ukraine. So, if that be so, it then becomes important that when we think about next year, we think about hard and we think about it practically. And I want to layer my whole conversation really this morning about what do coalitions effectively take and what would they look like. Firstly, I don't want to, we will all come on stage and make this case that we agree, all of us need shared values. We need a shared vision for this country. But at the same time as that, I want to address this very simple question, which is, what do we learn from a coalition that has held, which is the ANC's coalition? Because the ANC is a coalition of the SACP, COSATU, and the trade unions, and the central part of the ANC. They've held for the last 30 years. You may disagree with why they've stuck together. Maybe their sole objective was to steal. But held they have, and maybe there's no greater unity than the unity of stealing or blue light brigades, but it has stuck it out. So what has made it stick it out then becomes the question. And I want to say this number of thoughts. The first is, they've had to consider strongly the question of what is in the interest of the most selfish voter who sits within the coalition. You can go to the trade unions and say to them, we will give you an increase of above inflation, and that's what keeps you in the coalition. We can go to the SACP and say to them, you will get ministerial positions, particularly in the economics cluster, and that will keep you in the coalition. So long as you leave us to carry on looting or doing whatever, the coalition holds. So if coalitions next year are going to work, they aren't just going to work on the principle of saying, here are shared values, here are shared goals. We have to articulate this notion of what sits in the mind of the most selfish voter in the country. I was really looking forward to speaking to Mr. Hlabisa because we have to in some ways have a conversation about what does the Ngonyama Trust mean in KZN as it relates to the land question if you are going to coalesce with another party. When we say, what does redress and justice look like? What does it mean when people ask you the question, but maybe I might be colorblind and be non-racial as a position, for the argument's sake. These are issues that if you are going to fix for coalitions, you need to establish a sense upon which we have to settle for the most selfish Because all voters will go to the ballot box and answer the question, what is in my interest? And so I don't want us to be unrealistic and sit here today and say, well, as long as you guys can get together and have a good time, we'll make our way forward. I want us to be really ruthless at getting in the room and answering some of the tough questions that South Africans face up to from their perspective. What does dignity mean for the person in Soweto who is hungry? What does all of these things mean for the leader of the party who's going to tell them, I want us to coalesce with people that perhaps maybe historically you've never been able to get a hold of? Which brings me to my next point, which is this, that it's going to take profound leadership. You see, the success perhaps of this doomsday coalition that the ANC is that they've had to continuously settle on leadership, and a leadership that has to manage contradiction. Our nation is that. It has to deal with the question of contradictions. We are a marriage of black, white, Indian, and colored with different interests. Leadership in this country is going to take a leadership that has to bring all of those together. So the first point I want to make is, let's identify crucial selfish voters. Secondly, let's establish what the leadership protocol is going to be over a long term, because we're going to establish a leadership that unites South Africans. Thirdly, we're going to have to build a coalition with a broad society. Mike's point about corporates not being here should not be understated, and I want to say to corporate South Africa, it does indeed sicken me that the idiom, I was saying to Davi at our table, the idiom that has always been that government or business has never found a government it does not like, even under apartheid, sometimes does remain true. In the face of load shedding, water shedding, all of those, corporate South Africa cannot afford to sit back on the sidelines and have a few individual CEOs make some remarks, whilst institutions like BLSA, etc., and Business Unity South Africa remain silent in the face of a profound injustice that is taking place. Our coalition has to be broader. Can't just be a coalition of political parties. If next year is going to be significant, it's going to require business, it's going to require civil society, it's going to require all of us to roll up our sleeves and say, what change do we want to bring to this country? Because if you do not reset our relations to one another, you run the risk of changing the colors from black, green, and gold and adding as many different colors as you like, a rainbow-type coalition, and end up governing the same way and delivering the same outcomes in a country that needs profound reset, fellow South Africans. What we need, furthermore, is we need to modernize all of our relations. I think Mr. Mashaba will tell you a little bit more about the state of infrastructure in Johannesburg when he was mayor. Or maybe Celliers will tell you likewise about Tshwane. So not only do we need to modernize infrastructure in this country, but we need to modernize broadly as a country. It's no accident that we've got relations with Russia and China and base them on historical relations that come from not only modern day Russia, but in fact Soviet Union Russia. It's a lack of modernization as a function of a leadership that is archaic. I do not just despise the ANC for its own corruption. Sometimes I despise them for their failure to articulate a future for my children. Because I worry that when somebody stands up proudly and said, I was with Oliver Tambo at Morogoro marching together, I wonder what that person is going to tell me about the metaverse. Some of the people who are running our country must really, to be fair, we must give them a chance to spend time with their grandchildren and knit, because they are that age. We not only need to modernize our infrastructure, but we need to modernize our new relations and figure out who are new trading partners globally and create new relations in this for South Africa in a geopolitical world. But we furthermore need to ensure that we have a government of the future, not a government of the past. Why you still have to fill in manual forms, I still don't understand. When a government can be modernized. Why when you go to a police station to report a crime, The affidavit is still being captured by hand, and then you walk out of there not sure whether your statement and that of the policeman are exactly the same consistent things. Fellow South Africans, it's a period now of not only modernizing our geopolitical relations, but our economic relations as far as upgrading, but also our spatial relations. We live apart from each other. We need to come together. So let me say this. I hold this simple truth. We've got to not only own a vision for tomorrow, produce a new leadership, ensure South Africa economically grows so that we can deliver. So here are my closing thoughts. Any coalition that's going to work has to include all of us, has to come up with new ideas, can't just be a trading off of positions. We have to figure out the best ways to keep the lights on. No economy is going to grow in the dark. That's a fact. And so if we're going to focus on growth, we have to keep the lights on. And I'm proposing that more citizens need to come on board. I think we're going to reduce demand, but we need to add and supplement our own energy consumption. We need to fix our transport and logistics. Transnet will make Eskom look like a picnic. And in truth, you cannot be involved in an export market without effective working ports. We have to keep our citizens safe, and I've proposed that we've got to bring policing down to a local government, to a provincial and local level, so that we can have better intelligence to fight crime, because crime is not committed by new people every day. It is committed by the same criminals doing new crimes. We have to educate our kids. I honestly say this, and it pains my heart to say, that Verwoerd would be proud of this government as far as what they've achieved in education. Our kids are not only passing at 30%, but if the privilege of money dictates what kind of education you are going to have. So when we started Build One South Africa, it wasn't just a question of saying, let's just add in the list of political parties that exist. We went out to communities and said to them, you be empowered. Let's bring that democracy back to our people, and you can directly elect your own representatives. We're grateful that we've been able to recruit over 400 communities who have said, let's pick our people and let's put them on the table, and we'll train them and make sure they produce the best. We have to bring citizens across all into the center of the conversation, because at this point in time, if you learn anything about last week's Blue Light Brigade incident, is that those who are favored in this country are the political elite, and ordinary citizens are left to sound the road, to sit on the side of the road being beaten up by a political system. We need a reset, fellow South Africans, and I hope sitting in this room when we ask questions, we not only think of next year as just another day to go cast a cross on the ballot, but indeed we can bring a reformation, a restart to our nation that projects a future for South Africa in a globally competitive universe that asks better of us, not where we've come from. I thank you.
Well, you guys have got a game on your hands following that. Well done, Musi. Thank you so much. The next contributor was handed a proper hospital pass. At the last minute, Gayton McKenzie did indicate that he would participate in this event, but then sadly got stuck in George, where there's some by-election work that needs to be done. And stepping up is somebody who you may have watched an interview that I did with him, Charles Celliers. It was quite a feisty interview, but Charles, thank you so much for coming, and we'd like you to come up and tell us exactly where you stand.
Morning. I think we are the, when you do those IQ tests and you spot the odd one out, if there were a bunch of logos there, I think everybody would point at the PA here. But I'd question the intelligence of that. And I think that's why we say yes to coming to all of these things. And I must apologize for Gayton. He did want to come, but there's a very hot by-election of 3 wards in George at the moment. And I'd encourage you to follow the outcome of those, because it's 3 wards that were owned by Good previously. And it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, because we're seeing a phenomenon in the Western Cape where everybody is talking about how the ANC might drop below 50% come next year. And of course, we all want to see that. We do want to see what happens when a former liberation party, well, a liberation party still really, faces this crisis in the history of a country like ours, where suddenly they no longer have a stranglehold and a monopoly on power. But what people are not talking about is the very, very strong possibility that the Western Cape may also have to go into a coalition. And I think that is something that will fill many of the people in this room with a bit of dread, but it is something, quite honestly, that's something that we as the PA are working to doing. We want to bring coalition politics into the Western Cape. That has been the stated outcome of our party from inception, and we're getting closer to doing that. And when you open News 24 and you read the things that you read about Gayton Mackenzie and what you read about the Patriotic Alliance, and I assure you, it's lies. It's because of this terror that the Western Cape is going to have to go into a coalition, and they might have to go into a coalition with us. So let's talk about that, right? If you have to lie as a political party to stay in power, my view is you don't deserve to stay in power. And that is the problem that we're having currently with being in coalitions involving the DA. And unfortunately, the coalition that we were in with the DA in the city of Johannesburg, didn't work out. We worked with them for 6 months. We reached a point where it was impossible for us to continue. Then we got to a point where we were going to go back into a coalition with the DA. And Action SA is here today. Herman Mashaba is here today, and Action was willing to give up their positions on the mayoral committee to include us back into City of Johannesburg. And today we would have had a coalition. We would be standing here. There'd be a multi-party coalition governing Johannesburg. And the DA sabotaged that. They made it impossible for us to do that. So when you say that the PA is propping up the ANC and keeping the ANC in power, that is simply not true. Me personally, I have absolutely no time for the ANC. The PA is not a proxy vote for the ANC. We have done everything we can. Me personally, I can show you the WhatsApps, I can show you the messages. We have tried to go into coalition governments, mainly with the DA, because that's the option that you have if you're not going to work with the ANC, everywhere in this country. But the DA, because of this fear that they have of losing the Western Cape, have to push us towards the ANC. They have to try to sell this lie that a vote for the PA is a proxy vote for the ANC, because they hope that that's going to help them to retain the Western Cape, and that people are going to say, ooh, let's not vote for the PA because that's a proxy vote for the ANC. And that, unfortunately, is the strategy to drive us towards the ANC, and because the PA has always been clear about the fact that we can work with anyone, we have to follow through with that. So we go into these coalitions with the ANC, and it's a case of where we have governing power, where we have mayors, where we have MMCs, where we have chairpersons of committees, we show what we can do. And where in Johannesburg you can see Kenny Kunene is MMC Roads and Transport. We also have Human Settlements. We have MMCs throughout the country. We have mayors throughout the country. Where the PA governs, even if it's in certain portfolios, you see service delivery, because we're a pragmatic party. We're a party that's about delivery. And I think the biggest tragedy that has come out of the past 18 months, 18 months, was what PA President Gayton Mackenzie did, going into the Central Karoo. He decided that he's going to look for the one municipality that we have some say over as the PA, where there is no money, where there's no service delivery, where there's basically an absence of hope. And we looked around and the Karoo has been run into the ground. And he had a look at it, and he said he thinks he's going to go and be the mayor of the Central Karoo because it's bankrupt, it ticked all the boxes, it's a hopeless place. And he went in there and he said, look, he's not going to take his salary, he's going to donate his salary to charity. He's not going to take a single bodyguard. He's not going to live in any kind of mayoral residence. He took no perks whatsoever. He never even saw the mayoral credit card. For a year, he said, I'm going to be the mayor for a year. And he's doing this because he's been a businessman. I mean, yes, he started off being an armed robber many years ago, came out of prison in 2001. But since then, became a businessman, became a published author, became a very successful, ultimately successful politician, but never had public service experience. So he said, let's go into the Central Karoo and let's get that experience. So went in for 1 year and said he's not going to take a single perk of being an official, he's just going to serve. And he made promises to say, within my first 100 days, these are the things we're going to do. We're going to replace all the bucket toilets in the Central Karoo. We're going to fix pools. And along the way, he fixed, there was asbestos water in one community. These people were drinking basically water with dead animals floating in these tanks. And a number of other smaller projects, but it was primarily, it was pools and eradicating the bucket toilet system, which has been in place for generations. And the 100 days rolled around, the bucket toilets were all gone. Much of it was on Transnet land, and that was always the excuse that people had to say, oh, well, we can't fix it, it's on Transnet land. But we put flushing toilets, where previously there'd been these disgusting bucket toilets. And the year went by, you heard nothing. Then, all of a sudden, a month or two after he resigns, he said he's going to be there for a year. He was there for a year, he resigns. Then all of a sudden, you open News 24, you open Daily Maverick, and they show you all these photos of this broken pool. This pool is in terrible condition. It's called the Rustine swimming pool. Gayton Mackenzie lied. Oh no, he said he's going to fix the pools, and look at this broken pool. But what they don't tell you is that there's 6 pools in the Central Karoo, 6 municipal swimming pools, maybe more, but we know of the 6. And they're in different little towns. And what we did was we fixed 2 in Beaufort West and 3 elsewhere throughout the Central Karoo. And there was one swimming pool that didn't get fixed. And we said, we haven't fixed it yet. And they went and they took photographs of that pool and splashed it all over the media and said, oh, look, Gayton Mackenzie lied to you. They never went and looked at one flushing toilet, but they found one burst pipe that was burst for 1 day, went and took photos of that burst pipe, and went on about effectively a crime against humanity because there was a burst pipe, which was fixed the next day, and Gayton himself went to go and fix it. So we have this issue that we want to work with the DA, but the DA doesn't want to work with us. But we feel that that's fine. You know, we've got our supporters. All the lies that are being told about us, all the propaganda isn't working. If you have a look at the results of the by-elections, especially in the Western Cape, look at Swellendam. We didn't win that by-election, but we came ahead of the DA. Look at Ward 7, just the other day, 2 weeks ago, in the city of Johannesburg. Everybody was saying, a vote for the PA is a vote for the ANC. We won that by-election resoundingly. In some of these VDs, where previously the DA would get most of the support, we got 80, 90% of the vote. So it should be a lesson to the parties that are trying to paint us as somehow some sort of proxy for the ANC, that kind of negative campaigning doesn't work. and our supporters are with us, and trying to paint us as some kind of ANC gevaar isn't working. So the reason I'm here is, yes, there's a lot of bad blood. We're going to hear from someone in the DA, Leon Schrieber, that actually tweeted in response to these absolutely nonsense stories on News 24 that Gayton must go to jail, that Gayton is a criminal, that the money that was supposedly fundraised to fix the pools, get rid of the bucket toilets, that we somehow stole this money, even though not a single funder has complained. They've all gone and they've seen the work was done. And we're going to hear from someone in the DA that actually tweeted that Gayton McKenzie must pay back the money to people who don't want the money back. They really don't want their money back. They're happy. And he must pay back the money, he must go to jail. But despite that, we are still willing to work with anyone. And we're disappointed that we're not invited to this Moonshot Pact, or whatever you want to call it. Even though personally I'm actually quite exhausted with listening to the back and forth between all the parties that are part of this multi-party thing. I've been part of it. I was part of how many chats? And I think that the issue that we sit with is that most of the people that go to these discussions about what the future of the country should be, where we should be going, have good intentions. They have the future of the country, the future of our children at heart. But then you get in there, and there's this strange bad blood. It's personal. You've got people that just don't like each other. You've got how many splinter parties of people? You've got Build One South Africa, you've got Action SA. People effectively couldn't work with Helen Zille. Now they have to work with Helen Zille to try to save the country. And we're saying, as the PA, it's an absolute mess. It's a family fight. It's toxic. It's very discouraging. But we're saying as the PA that we are still willing to be part of it. We're still willing to be part of that solution. And we're even willing to sign a pre-coalition agreement with the DA that we will not go into a coalition with the ANC and the Western Cape, provided we can find each other in some way prior to next year's election. But that isn't going to happen. We'd love it to happen. But unfortunately, the lie has to be maintained. And there's a thing in politics called the big lie, that if you just repeat nonsense over and over and over and over, eventually it becomes the truth. But it's never going to be the truth. So what I'd like you to take away from this here today is that the PA wants to be part of the solution. We're a pragmatic party. We are patriots. Everybody in the PA loves this country. And we know we have to be part of the solution. But we'll wait patiently to be part of that solution. And the day that the call-up comes, we'll be there. Thank you.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the sound of the gloves coming off. Thanks, Charles. Thanks for that. And let's hear from a person that one can only describe as, from every report that we've read on these things, as the adult in the room. Somebody who does speak sense, who seems to be able to rise above the pettiness. And that is Corné Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus. Did a great interview with him recently. Somebody who talks a lot of sense. And here he is. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Corné Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus.
Good morning. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see everyone here and to be able to participate this morning. I am going to perhaps approach this from a different angle. It's correct that I am a member of the Freedom Front Plus. I serve in Parliament as the Chief Whip of the Freedom Front Plus. And it just happened to be a situation that played out where I found myself at the moment as the longest serving member of Parliament. It's terrible. I've been there for many, many years. Some of you may remember there was a person called Mr. P.W. Botha. When I came to Parliament, he was still the president. And I saw him go, and then I saw Mr. de Klerk take over. And then the transition in '94 with Mr. Mandela. And then it was Thabo Mbeki, and it was Matlantle, and it was Jacob Zuma, and it was Cyril. And I intend to stay there until Cyril is gone as well, and until we have replaced the ANC with a multi-party coalition government that can change this country for the better. Now, that's not going to be easy, and as you all know, at the moment, the talks are very much about coalitions, and the whole question of coalitions, is it possible, is it not possible, what can be done, etc. And my colleague from the DA will speak just now, and I guess Dr. Schrieber will speak about the Moonshot Pact, and I think that would become relevant in the discussion perhaps later this morning. But my concern is that I think we are underestimating the ANC. And I think if we are not going to do this the right way, we will not succeed in defeating the ANC. I think we are really underestimating the ANC. One should understand that the ANC, and remember that they were founded in 1912, and that they are very serious in terms of what they do, in terms of what they've achieved, good or bad. And I don't think they've got any inclination of letting go of power in South Africa. None whatsoever. I don't think that the ANC is really a democratic institution. I don't think they believe in democracy. We've seen them in action in the metros where they were defeated and where we were able to form coalitions. And I can assure you they've done everything legally and almost illegally to try and destabilize those coalition governments. And if we think it's going to be plain sailing next year, if we can get the ANC out of government, we're in for a very bad awakening. I think we're underestimating the ANC. And that means the following. Are we serious to try and get the ANC out of government? Yes or no? That's the question. Are we serious? Because if we are serious, then we should understand what the challenge really means. It's not going to be plain sailing. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a question of, well, let's see how things develop. Let's go to the polls next year. Let's all vote and we see what's going to happen. I've been involved with the coalition project for quite a while because I've believed in coalitions for many, many years in my political career. And if you look at our electoral system is a straightforward system of proportional representation. That means it will always lead to coalitions. It's supposed to lead to coalitions because in proportional systems, one single party is not supposed to get more than 50% of the vote. It's abnormal. And if you look internationally, you'll see that in, let's say, for example, Germany or somewhere, one party may end up with 34% of the vote, and then that party won the election, the biggest and the strongest party, and they form a government. We've had an abnormal democracy since '94 where one party continuously received more than 50%. Luckily, it is now coming to an end, I believe, where the ANC will go below 50%, and that gives us the opportunity to form a coalition government. First point to understand is that coalitions are only formed after the election. You can't form the coalition before the election because you don't know what the outcome would be. You first need to campaign and see what the results would be, and if it's possible to form a coalition government. When I said what I thought was the answer, and I still believe that's the answer, and I'm still going to push that line regardless of other developments, because if we are serious that we want to get the ANC out of government, I don't know if any of you feel that way, I feel that way, that after 30 years, it's time to get the ANC out of government, completely out of government. They've had their chance. They had the best opportunities in the world to make a success of this country. They messed it up. They must go. In totality, they need to get out of government. If we do not do that, I am very concerned. I don't think we can afford a further 5 years of ANC mismanagement and everything that goes with that. So, if we want to be successful, we are talking about regime change in 10 months from now. 10 months. That's not a very long time. It's a rather short period. And then we can only do it the right way. If we don't do it the right way, we will not succeed, we will frustrate the electorate, and we will send this country down the spiral for a further 5 years when I don't think there will be much to pick up after that. So what do we need to do? It's no use to rearrange the current 35% of the electorate and the people that voted for opposition parties. It's no use, it's a waste of time. It's no use to try and form a coalition that you build around political parties alone. It will not succeed. It's no use if one party gets 2% more, another one gets 1% less. So what? We achieved nothing. The success of regime change starts with civil society, not with the political parties. And unless we can succeed in getting all of civil society involved, we will not succeed in 2024. You must hear me, you must understand that. Some of you will remember, if you think back, before the 94 process, there was an organization called the UDF, United Democratic Front. It was a broad church, consisting of the totality of civil society, churches, trade unions, academics, business community, individuals, you name them. Everyone got involved to get the regime change and get rid of the former National Party at that stage. Unless we do that, we will not succeed. Trust me, we will not succeed. So there comes a time when in society, in those different groups that I've just mentioned, that sectors of society, when individual people and leaders and all that people who are involved, no one must be in the position to say, well, that's very interesting. I'm going to follow this closely. I'm going to sit back. I really hope that you succeed. There's no you. There can only be us. It's everyone. It's everyone, or we are not going to succeed. That means it's a difficult time where individuals and leaders will have to do what in my language, Afrikaans, is called, you quite often have a meeting, and then people discuss things and they say, well, what are we going to do? What will we do? And then somebody gets up and say, ek sal dit doen. I will do this. Ek sal dit doen. The time has come across the spectrum in South Africa, in all of those sectors of society, where we need leaders, we need individuals to stand up and say, I will do this. I will get involved. We have crossed the Rubicon in terms of we need regime change in 2024. And what needs to then happen is the following. We need to get this process of a new UDF, a broad process within civil society to get going. It should create a tsunami kind of effect in South Africa where everyone gets involved. First point, if people are not registered, they cannot vote. If they cannot vote, they mean nothing. They can write a letter in the press, it's irrelevant. You need to vote. Before you can do that, you need to register. This kind of broad church needs to get enthusiasm among South Africans to go out and register. Each individual must take responsibility. Are you registered? Are your family registered? Are all your friends registered? That's step one. If you can't do that, you can't vote. If we get the people out there to register, we can win and beat and have regime change. In order to do that, and I'll try to conclude, there are 4 groups that we need to focus on. 4 groups. We need to get out to young people, those between 18 and 35 who have opted out of the system, who have not registered, who do not participate in politics. That's the first group. The second group are older people, my age, who have also opted out of the system, mainly Afrikaans, many of them white people who say, oh, it's not going to make any difference. We need to get them back into the system. The third group is approximately 1/3 of ANC supporters out there are disillusioned with their own party. We need to go out there, convince them, and get them to support a new beginning. But we must do that in the right way and not expect them. They will not necessarily join some of the current political parties. They can't do that. But they may use other forms and other vehicles to get back. The last group is expats, our people in the abroad. We will vote and we will support this kind of approach. We need to do that. Are we serious for regime change? Are we really serious? So what I foresee is this. We get this broad church going. It should have a name. It should have an emblem, a logo. And everyone gets involved. then political parties that subscribe to what this stands for, because this broad movement should subscribe to the basic, let's say 5, 10 basic principles. Those things are that you find in international best practice, successful countries in terms of free market, in terms of the guarantee of property rights, non-racialism, rule of law. Go and make that list. Then the political parties that associate with that should apply to this UDF and say, we would like to join this thing. What will happen then? The electorate and the public will know which parties are prepared to support this. And then those parties will have their own campaigns, and on their campaign posters will be a small little logo also of this broader entity, so that the public know I can still vote for the party of my choice. But I know my party will, after the election, become part of a broader coalition that will govern the country in terms of these principles, and we can change South Africa around. If we do it not this way, we are not serious, we are fooling the public, and we are wasting our time. The winner will be the ANC in that regard, because they will still just continue as is. In conclusion, what does our people want? What do they need? They need hope. They need a new beginning. They need to be convinced that this country can be the best country in Africa, if not the world. We've got all the potential. We've got everything is there. But our people lost hope. They don't think it can be done. It can be done. But then political parties must get over themselves. Political leaders must understand that it's not about them. It's about the people out there. It can be done. Help us. Thank you.
That's why we had to take this microphone to the lectern so that he didn't drop the mic when he was finished. Corné Mulder, you definitely seem to understand what needs to be achieved, and let's just hope more people are on the same page as you. Our next leader is somebody who's made quite an impact since moving from business to politics, and now heads up a party that is a party in every sense of the word, with big structures, a whole cast of thousands, and certainly has made an impact wherever they have contested. I'd like to welcome on stage from Action SA, Mr. Herman Mashaba.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, fellow South Africans. This question of coalition, it's unfortunately South Africans are approaching it from an academic standpoint. This is not an academic matter. This is about the future of our country. This is about saving South Africa from being another failed African country. We've got major, major challenges. I took a very difficult decision in late 2015 to really be part of the solution, accepting to be the mayoral candidate for the city of Johannesburg with no inclination, no idea whatsoever what the mayor does. But I was prepared to do something, not to stand on the fence, throw my head in the ring. We are fortunate to unseat the ANC. And I just want South Africans actually to really know this and accept it clearly. Whether you accept it or not, it's not my problem. I'm in this game to unseat the ANC. If you don't like it, it's your problem, and I'm unapologetic about this. We need to unseat the ANC, and we need to do it in a peaceful, democratic fashion. Not burning tires, not burning our clinics and schools and our infrastructure. I served under very difficult trying circumstances as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg for 3 years with the party I was representing, knowing very well what I stood for and what I wanted to achieve. It had me badly. Even today, I don't think I'll ever recover from that. When my party and the ANC had secret meetings to have a motion of no confidence against me. And it became really very difficult for the residents of Johannesburg to understand and believe me, because they believed the lies that were told. But fortunate enough, when you tell a lie, somewhere along the line, you sleep. I'm sure you all know why I resigned. Because I'm not the kind of person that's going to be pushed by anyone. So I was not prepared to stand and be removed from power by the ANC and DA motion of no confidence against me, coming out with the lies to call me an EFF mayor. Just imagine Herman, Mashaba, and EFF. It's like salt and water. Why I respected and worked with the EFF at the time? Because I needed their votes. Without the EFF's 30 votes, there was just no way I can run a government. No ways. Us as a DA, we only had 104 votes. To really pass any major report in Parliament, you needed, in Council, you needed 136 votes. EFF, and I was not part of putting together that coalition arrangement because I was not in any senior structures of the party at the time when they imposed the EFF on me. But when I started obviously engaging them, which was necessary, then unfortunately I was termed an EFF mayor, including insulting me, hating me, that I'm taking the residents' money, provide services to poor communities. And you ask yourself, when you're in government, what are you in government for? Government, it's not about providing services to only those that voted for you. When you're in government, you provide services to everyone. Now, for me to go and provide portable toilets to poor communities, set up drug rehab centers in those communities because of ANC opening our borders, allowing international drug syndicates to come and destroy not only our youth, our communities. When I focus on these issues, then you call me an EFF mayor. That, unfortunately, or fortunately, brought to the formation and the birth of Action SA. And I challenge any one of you, not a single analyst or professor or any of these clever people, gave us the chance. They said, this is the biggest joke to come out of the political environment. They said, if Action SA gets 3 votes in the city of Johannesburg, they'll be lucky. Launched on the 29th of August, right in the middle of COVID. We couldn't contest. 2 or so weeks before the elections, IEC came into the mix, decided to get us to contest as a logo. The elections came because time will move, whether we like it or not. Action SA came in Johannesburg with 44 councillors. In Tshwane, 19. In Ekurhuleni, 15. And everywhere where we contested in the 3 other municipalities in KZN, we brought the ANC under 50%. We now have structures throughout the country. We are going to contest all 9 provinces come 2029. We contested a by-election 2 weeks ago in Ward 7 where our colleagues in the Patriotic Alliance showed us some fire, but we can tell you we showed fire to the ANC in that ward, All the black areas, Even PA can tell you, as much as they won the award, they don't feature. And us in the colored communities, we showed some marginal growth. We took one of the VDs. This VD has been an ANC VD since 1994. So we're not a player playing here. We are determined to see this country succeed. Succeed not for my children, for my grandchildren. Because if I look at the damage ANC has caused, because you can understand ANC was trained by the Russians to destroy. And they've done a fantastic job of destruction. And they're still perfecting it. Putin is still teaching them to destroy. And they're going to continue destroying this country. Come 2024, we have an ANC government in this country. I can tell you the economy of this country is not going to sustain this country to 2024. We must accept that we are going to be a failed state. So therefore, what does this say to us? We've got to find a way to really get coalitions to work, because no one is going to get 50%. And I think we must stop this nonsense of ever saying ANC might drop below 50%. ANC is not going to get 40%. It's no longer the question of a might. It's a reality. ANC is not going to get anywhere close to 40%. But will the coalition partners succeed in forming a stable government? I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic for two reasons. Firstly, the ANC is a very disruptive organization. And every time I listen to the experts as to why we are not succeeding, honestly, they are so far away from reality. They are looking at this whole thing from an academic point of view. They don't actually look at why do coalitions not work. Firstly, ANC is very disruptive. They are not going to sit back and allow us to really be stable. But secondly, I think we would really need the DA to really show some little bit of respect, little bit. Because if that's not going to happen, it's going to be very, very difficult. Because it really hurts me personally to see the city of Johannesburg being run by this coalition of crooks of the ANC and EFF, with a mayor who has got a lot to answer, that the DA prefers to have this mayor than us actually getting the Patriotic Alliance to be part of this government. Where we went to a level as a section SA to say, DA, if you can't be in this coalition, you don't want to be in a coalition arrangement, we respect that. It is your right, and it's fair. But then give us an opportunity and vote with us on an issue-by-issue basis. But because, honestly, you cannot tell us you are happy to have ANC and EFF running the city of Johannesburg because you don't like PA. Leave the PA to us to manage. And you hold us accountable, because when you vote on an issue-by-issue basis, you are the most powerful, because that government cannot do anything without consulting you. And you are not part of that government that you because you believe you don't want to be part of a mess. We as others are prepared to be part of that mess, and we want you to hold us accountable. So we will see with this convention. As a section SA, we committed to it, but we want everyone in that arrangement to really come to the table with good faith. Because one thing that people will get to really know me, I'm 63 years old. In a month's time, I'll be 64. So I'm not a young man. I'm supposed to be at SASA right now on a queue to get Ramaphosa's 350 rands. I'm doing this terrible, difficult job that I hate because I want to see ANC out of government come 2024. But for us to refuse and drive the PA into the ANC EFF camp, I think it's irresponsible. We will do everything possible to make sure that we can form a government that can unseat the ANC. Because if we are going to drive other parties like the PA into the ANC camp, then we've got a problem. You know, for us as Action SA, even this last Saturday, I think a lot of my colleagues captured this, when our exploited South Africans, security cleaners in Johannesburg, sorry, in Tshwane, read the riot act to me, that in the event that the GA does not really comply with our legal agreement, contractual agreement that we needed to enforce, that says if I don't, we must pull out of the coalition in Tshwane. So I listened. When it was come for me to talk, I said to them, please let me address one thing. You guys says I must pull out of the coalition in Tshwane because you feel I'm being exploited. Some people call me house nigger, that I'm allowing white people to control me. This is, I said to them, this is about my country. You can imagine if I've got to take that decision because the DA is not complying with our legal agreement. You know what is going to happen? I'm going to be giving you back to this ANC highness. Is that what you want? It was a crowd probably twice this number. All of them says, please stay in this arrangement. Because they realize if our Action SA pulls out of this arrangement, then we'll be giving the municipality back to the ANC and they will rejoice. And one thing I can assure you, Action SA, we will never intentionally give our governments to the ANC. It'll happen in Johannesburg, in Ekurhuleni, where we don't have the numbers. But everywhere where we have the numbers in Tshwane, I wanted to assure the DA they can play every trick in the book to pull out of Tshwane. Action SA is not going to pull out. And let's hope that this convention that we are going to have, it's going to be the convention when we put our country ahead of our own narrow personal interest. And I really hope and pray every day of my life that it succeed, because I want my children to be brought up in a to be born and brought up in a country where their grandfather, that's Herman Mashaba, who was born and lived more than half of his life under an evil system of apartheid, lived 29 years of hell under ANC. And I'm committed to ensuring that come 2024, ANC is confined to the dustbins of our history. And that's a commitment that I'd like to give to South Africans. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the morning edition of the Jerry Springer Show. Geez, hide all sharp objects because things just got real over here. Apparently there's no truth in the rumor that John Steenhuisen is curled up in the fetal position in his house in Cape Town. But he has sent a replacement. And boy, good luck. Dr. Leon Schrieber from the Democratic Alliance.
Thanks very much, Mike, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by saying you will not be getting any Jerry Springer Show theatrics in this 10 minutes, because I frankly think that South Africans are way beyond tired of politicians talking about the things that matter to us rather than about the things that matter to you. And frankly, when we hear the re-prosecution of things that happened in the past, of petty, vindictive comments, it is not helpful. So I will not be engaging in that. What I would like to do is to look forward. And I think if we are honest about the last few years, especially since 2021, and we look at the lessons that have been learned at local government level, there are a couple of structural factors that are not about personalities. And it's actually an important point. Not everything that has gone wrong in coalitions are because of the people acting in bad faith or because the people involved are somehow dishonest and bad. Not all of it is about that. Some of it is structural. For example, the fact that we have to rush these negotiations after elections, and at a national level we're talking about 2 weeks, is just not feasible. In many countries, and I'm not saying this is what we want, but just to show how difficult it can be, even in other countries, sometimes it takes a year for parties to actually work out an agreement. That is one of the key structural factors. Another is, of course, about positions and the inevitable sharing arrangements that go in there. And that is where a lot of the disagreements can take place in a very compressed and stressful period. So, what does the Moonshot Pact provide? It provides an opportunity to deal with some of these structural things up front, so that when next year's election rolls round and we have a situation where there's no majority, we don't have to do all of this in 2 weeks. And we actually have the ability to come together now already and find the agreements, the principles, minimum program of action, and potentially even a formula for what a cabinet would look like. And those are things that the parties involved in this process would be able to show the public and say, here are the things that we do agree on. Here is the minimum policy program that we would implement. And yes, of course, as many speakers have said, other particular parties may have other additional policies, and that's the voters' job to go and vote for those. But here is the minimum that we agree on. And crucially, what would a new government look like? I would invite you to actually think about that. I don't think anyone in this room has really properly considered that. What would a cabinet, you know, there's that picture of President Ramaphosa sort of looking back at the camera, and then he's got this half-moon table with his cabinet. What does it look like under a new government? That is the kind of exciting, positive things that we can essentially front-load right now. And of course, the purpose here is to find ways of minimizing the kind of bickering and pettiness that puts voters off, and find a way for us to actually focus on the real problem in the room. None of the people in this room are the problem. Not one. No matter how much people dislike each other or what happened in the past, the problem is the ANC. And how are we going to focus on the real problem rather than the internal squabbling? So that doesn't mean after a convention, I think anyone here is going to necessarily, fall in love with each other. But surely we can find ways of coexisting up to the election in a way that it's not become counterproductive. That is one of the real driving forces behind the conversations. And really, I can only thank, on behalf of John Steenhuisen and all of the party leaders that have been involved in this process. I think there have been 8 meetings now, and we really are making a lot of progress towards the convention. So I would invite you to really watch that space closely. Now, one of the important things that we must keep in mind is that any alternative government, whether we call it a pact or at local level, must provide a genuine alternative to the ANC. It cannot become an alternative version of the ANC. And this is really important long-term implications, because I can tell you now, we are caught up in 2024, and I think Mike said it's the most important election since '94, no doubt. But there is still a world after that. And if the coalition offer or the pact approach becomes corrupt like the ANC, fails to deliver like the ANC, I want to guarantee you one thing today. You will see the ANC come roaring back with a vengeance that you could never have imagined. Those are the stakes. We must get the pact right to be an alternative to the ANC, not an alternative version of the ANC, because otherwise the long-term effects are going to be only to the benefit of the ANC. I want to also say that we talk a lot about instances where coalitions haven't worked, but there are encouraging examples. It's a real shame that Mr. Tlhabisa isn't here, because I would really like to thank him for the example that's being set in KwaZulu-Natal. I would invite all of you to go and follow the developments politically in KwaZulu-Natal, because that is really the model. It is ground zero for the pact that we are talking about. Because what you have there is agreements between the DA and the IFP at this point, where places like Richards Bay are really starting to benefit from this cooperation. It is stable, it is respectful, and it has a real path to victory. In the most recent polling that we have, the DA and the IFP together were polling at 44% in KwaZulu-Natal. That's 6 points off forming a new government. It is at times as high as 48% here in Gauteng, and then you add the other parties that are cooperating, and you can see that that 50% really is within reach. And I don't think we should lose sight of the provincial dynamic as well. We talk about national, and we're all animated by the national election, but the opportunities in those two provinces, and potentially even other places like the Free State and the Northern Cape, should not go unnoticed. And I would invite you to look at KwaZulu-Natal as an example of how parties there have their own identities, they contest by-elections, but they do so in a way where it doesn't become counterproductive. If we can replicate that nationally, I think we will be on a winning wicket. Then to a point made about civil society, I absolutely agree that this isn't about you, it's about us. But I would say that there's probably one elephant in the room from civil society's point of view. And that is that they would like to see that these parties are actually serious. And I've had discussions where this has come up, where there are civil society organizations who say, look, we are excited about what's going on. We like the concept, coming together, ironing out these things, and then providing that credible alternative. But we can't bet on something that hasn't actually yet shown that it's serious. And I think that's where the convention that's coming up on the 16th and 17th of August is going to be really a decisive moment. If we can get that right, if we can show that there is common ground, we can take that also to civil society and encourage them and say, look, we are serious. Please join us in this project. But I think they want to see that we're actually walking the talk, as it were, before we get to that point. The pact and the election campaign should not just be about shuffling deck chairs while the Titanic is going down. And frankly, that is the alternative. If we do not get together, if we are not able to iron something out, then we are going to go into the election campaign as individual parties. And I guarantee you now, you will see the same script from previous elections of small parties, the DA, opposition broadly speaking, wasting resources that shouldn't have been necessarily wasted. And it is in that environment that we shuffle the deck chairs. If we get together and we show South Africans that there is a credible path to victory, that is what's going to actually help us grow beyond that existing 35%. And the reason for that is because there are 14 million people in this country who are not registered to vote, and another 13 million who are registered but don't have a reason to vote. Many of them believe there's no point to voting because the ANC always wins. It's a very deep-seated belief in South African society. So it is on us to show those people that there is another way. There's a credible way to get to a majority. This majority can be stable, it can form a government, it has minimum agreed policies that it will implement, and ultimately, it will be greater than the sum of its individual parts. That's what the project is about. And I believe fundamentally that that is how we're going to energize disillusion South African voters. Whether you previously voted for the ANC, whether you've given up voting for the past decade, those voters are ripe for the picking if we get this right. And here's the important thing, ladies and gentlemen. A rising tide is going to lift all boats. That's the beauty of this project. We don't have to shuffle deck chairs. If that group of 27 million South Africans are energized to come and vote, many of them are going to vote for different parties. And at the end of the day, you have a situation where the pact, as a collective and individually, can grow. That is the positive vision that I think is being laid out with the Moonshot Pact. Now, I will end on this note by saying that political intrigue and many of the things that we read in the newspapers every day are very interesting. They are great conversation topics, and boy, do they get people's blood boiling sometimes. But at the end of the day, that intrigue doesn't fix load shedding. That intrigue doesn't create jobs. It doesn't fix the education system. And that is why I end by saying the same thing that I started with. Voters don't care about the things that matter to politicians. Voters care about the things that matter to them. And at the end of the day, the pact must come forward with credible solutions on, even if it is the 5 most urgent priorities in this country, and say, we as a collective know that this is what's holding you back in life. Crime, unemployment, poverty, load shedding. And here's our agreed upon plan to address these things. If we can get to the point of talking to voters about those things that matter to them, I think we are going to be well on our way. So this is not a given. This will be a rocky road. There will be disagreements. And yes, you will get to enjoy the intrigue. But please hold politicians accountable for not making this process only about the bickering, the egos, the pettiness, the vindictiveness. Ask them, what's in it for me? How's the pact going to improve my life? If we can provide collectively a satisfactory answer to that question, then I would plead with you, go out, get registered, vote so we can rescue South Africa. Thank you.
So now we're starting to see the importance of this particular event. We need to get these people on stage. We need to hear what they have to say. We need them to get out of their system whatever is holding them back from forming a decent coalition that can actually contest elections. So after the break, we're going to now have breakfast. I know you're probably starving for that. So we will have breakfast, which is coming out right now. And as soon as that is done, we're going to have our speakers back on the stage, but we're going to have a few other people ask them questions as well. As we know, Davy Root, great economist, he ain't no shrinking violet, and all of this leads to one place, and that is the economy. So let's get some answers around the economy and those plans. As well as Sandile Swana, who will be joining us, political analyst, ex-ANC member, guy who understands what the country needs politically. We are going to ask some hard questions, so please enjoy your breakfast. We'll be back shortly. Thank you.